Well, ladies and gentlemen, I did not mean to start this podcast. We didn't, with some March Madness talk.
Oh, yeah.
But we did, and that's okay, because we're manic on the Manic Movie Misfits podcast, so we can talk about whatever we feel like, whenever. And that is what we open this podcast with. The topic for this podcast is Dune. Specifically, this is the Dune Part 2 podcast. We had a Part 1 conversation with John earlier, kind of our initial thoughts, and a slash deep dive into a lot of the different pieces of Dune. But we wanted Riley back. So, Riley back, actually, because you've been on the podcast before.
Twice now. This is my third time.
You're in the new setup. What do you think? You like it? Dig it?
It's nice.
Okay.
This is really nice.
Cool. Yeah, we decided to switch it up. We wanted to add some color, because it was kind of a sea of black for one, you know? It was just all black.
That's fair. It adds a little contrast.
Yeah. And then we wanted to add some more posters, and then we added some other decor that wasn't posters to, again, mix it up.
I like it. It's good.
Thanks.
It's fancy.
Yes, fancy. We're bougie here on the
yes.
on the podcast. Yeah, but we're gonna talk about Dune 2, or Dune. Yeah, well, actually, technically, yeah, Dune 2, Dune Part 2.
Yeah.
It's the, what is it, TJ?
Dune Part 2. Yeah.
Dune Part 2 podcast. Before
I like it.
Before we get into a deep conversation here, I'm just going to recap for the audience and you, Riley, because I was supposed to send you what we talked about and I didn't.
It's good.
But I'm going to do that real quickly. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't checked out Part 1, please do, because we talk about most of the main characters, the black and white sections of the film, talk about just kind of the overall timeline of the film, like some of the big key scenes in the film as well. Talked about Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, obviously Timothée Chalamet, Austin Butler. For the most part, that's what we got to. Some things that we didn't hit on that we definitely should talk about this episode is Stilgar, because he's funny and a very important character, obviously, to the movie. More scenes and shots, because we did that at the end, but there's definitely a lot more we can talk about. And I did recap the first episode. I'm looking at my bullet points here. Also, there's some great references to other films that I want to bring up, because that was really cool, and I definitely nerded out there. And then another kind of fascinating topic is just what Star Wars borrowed, because Dune was a book, and Star Wars borrowed from Dune and the Dune franchise. So we'll talk about that a little too, because I think that'd be fun, considering we're all Star Wars fans.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of the timeline I have. But please go wherever you want, Riley. Like it says, we're manic here. We kind of just talk about whatever.
We're going to let you drive the bus a little bit.
Last time I drove the bus, May 4th was a wild episode.
That it was.
You are the captain now, Riley.
I'm the captain now.
Irish. I am the captain now.
I can't wait for your reaction, too, to some of our new sound buttons.
Oh, no.
Oh, boy.
Which you haven't had the treat of hearing as well. TJ cries.
The shame.
Is there anything, TJ, you want to bring up before we get going? Are you about to tell me that you're leaving the podcast?
Oh yeah, this is cue the ode to Trevor. Oh yeah, I'm out of here.
You're in a different spot. Riley was actually, you know what? Riley, you are literally the captain now, because that is normally where TJ sits.
It is.
Oh, I just sat down. I didn't
Oh
mean
no,
to.
it's all good. Yeah, I mean, I don't care.
Okay.
Totally
did not mean to do that.
I don't care.
It changes up the scenery, actually.
It does.
Mixes things up.
It's very bizarre sitting here.
Oh yeah. Well, TJ brings up a good point too, because even in our original setup, he was still relatively across from me. It wasn't quite direct, but it was still kind of across. So for TJ to be this close to me, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to be too close to you. You scare me.
Oh. Violence. Come over here, TJ. I'm gonna hit you with a tack hammer.
Why do you have a tack hammer?
It's just here all of the time. It really is. Every time I come into this room, it's
I was
there.
wondering, why is that there?
It never leaves, especially the table.
Oh.
It's our centerpiece.
If anyone's getting out of hand, you know what I'm saying? Be careful,
Makes
Riley.
sense.
Be careful.
I got distance. It's okay.
That's true. We'll take everything out on TJ.
Well, I usually have the advantage of distance, so that's why.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's why little John, he gets rambunctious, and we hit him with the tack hammer.
If you notice if any of you listen or watch the YouTube versions of the podcast and you see random cuts in between John's dialogue, it's because I'm hitting him with a tack hammer.
Oh yeah, or we just do it between shots.
Between shots. Yes, that's right.
Something like that.
Makes sense.
The last thing I'll say before we get started is, so Tennessee Volunteers men's basketball team, ladies and gentlemen, lost today. They were a 1 seed in the SEC tournament and lost to a 9 seed. Yeah. What that means is, for this podcast, I'm basically going to put in the performance MJ put in during the flu game. I'm going to have a flu game Michael Jordan performance here. So get ready. Get ready. It's going to be amazing. I was literally depressed and almost crying earlier today.
That's how we open the door.
We can attest to this.
Oh,
The exact words were, "Don't talk about it. Nothing happened today. Don't worry about it."
Anyway, Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2, Part 2. Riley, since you weren't here last time, and like I said before, if there's anything you want to talk about, please talk about it. What were your takeaways, one of your main takeaways at least, from Dune Part 2?
Part 2. Okay. I loved it. I mean, a lot more than the first one, but there's no way I could love it more without having the first one. I feel like I need to establish the first one is an incredible lead-in, but it's one of those iconic movies where that second movie is so much better than the first. Like, it's everyone can declare it. It's like, I mean, Empire Strikes Back category. Original Spider-Man trilogy number 2, like with Doc Ock. I'd put it on. I'm trying to think of other great second movies.
The Dark Knight.
How could I? That was the other one I've been talking about a lot.
Godfather Part 2.
That too.
Yes.
Aliens.
That's
Yes.
true.
And
Name
there's
a few. There's you could name a bunch.
yeah, there's definitely more, but besides the point.
Should say Before Sunset, since we do have Before Sunrise here.
Yes, that's a great one. But it was Dune Part 2 is hard to put words to because it does everything I think so masterfully. Like, I think the cinematography's on point, the acting's on point, the story's on point. I think the pace is on point. Like, I think everything is where it should be, and I don't think there's anything that can be out of place. And I mean, I have not read the book all the way through, so I can't speak on the adaptation of it. But from what I've heard from you guys, everything that was adapted was appropriately adapted to make it, I'd say, modernized, but also screen-worthy. Because, like, obviously there's some stuff in a book you can't translate because it's coming from in your head to on a screen. You got to simplify it a little bit or change it a little bit. But I think overall, with the movie, with the acting, it's perfect in a sense. I don't think I can put it any other way. It's perfect. I think that's a good place that I think I want to start with, like, just overviewing the movie. I think it's perfect.
That is a great analysis. TJ, I found your replacement.
All right. Ode to Trevor starts now.
You make a great point with you need Part 2 is better than Part 1, and you need Part 1 to set up Part 2.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That is, and I promised the audience last podcast I wouldn't reference the book nearly as much.
No.
But I will reference it here in the sense that is exactly what the book is. As a reader, you're reading it and you're saying, oh gosh, there's so many terms I have to look up in the back of the dictionary that's in the book. There's so much world building being set up right now. Like, I just want to get going. Can we just get going? Mm-hmm. I mean, I never thought that, but you kind of in the back of your head have that subconsciously. But yeah, once Part 2 happens, you have the world established. It really clicks, and you're building on all these great relationships and the things that you were kind of waiting on in Part 1. totally valid point.
Oh yeah, and the way they ended part 1 too definitely kicks up the pace to kick it into gear where it leaves off, where it starts from part 2 too. So it makes perfect sense in the sense, like, I've been talking like with my dad and other people who are like, I don't know if I can get through part 1, it's just slow. And I get that to an extent. Like, it definitely, the first half of the part 1 there's definitely parts that drag, but it's necessary to drag. Like, you need to kind of understand the expanse of the world. Like, it's a large, daunting, information filled, like, it's just so detailed. You need to understand the niches of it in a sense, because, like, you can't get the investment in a story if you don't build up the buy-in, I guess, is kind of a way to put it. Like, a great book series buys you in, builds it up right, and then they build off of that. Like, watching the second part would be beautiful. If I had no context, it'd still be like, this is a beautifully shot movie and this is very entertaining. I don't know what's happening.
Great performances.
Yeah, it's like, oh, the acting's great, it looks great, it's pretty, the soundtrack's awesome. But without the context, you don't have that investment. And I think great movies, great part 2s especially, they do a great job of investing the audience. And I think that's something that is very hard to do, but that's something that is worthy of doing. And I think good storytellers can do that right.
Yes. TJ, is there anything that you wanted to comment on with what Riley's been saying so far?
I mean, just in terms of, like, being a part 2, I mean, it just expands on everything, I think, in such a good way. Well, also, I mean, like, part 2 is definitely, as much as parts of it can be like a darker movie, it also adds a bit of levity to it almost, where it's more jokey, or like part 1
Stilgar.
Yeah.
As we talked about at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Part 1 is, like, really serious, like, all of the time. And I don't think there's, like, more than probably a joke in that movie. And then it's like, part 2, it's like every few minutes there's a joke. And you're like, oh, this is new. And that I think that was a nice little touch. It made it a lot, like, more... like, I feel like you can get more invested if it ebbs and flows instead of just being, like, serious all of the time, which, I mean, has its moments and I think works pretty well, but having some levity is fun.
Agreed.
Yeah, that was an interesting touch, because given how depressing a lot of that movie is,
Yeah.
It's very heavy.
Yeah.
I was surprised that Denis took the creativity in that direction,
Yeah.
but it worked really well. And
Yeah.
and it's so easy for something like that to go wrong in a movie that has to be so serious. But when you literally have Javier Bardem and Denis Villeneuve, it can work.
Oh, absolutely.
And the way Stilgar, Javier Bardem is able to travel to both of those planes, the comedic and then the very serious, oh, this is our Messiah, those two different levels is impressive, and that takes a good actor. But if that doesn't work, those two levels, honestly, parts of that movie and parts of Paul's ascension kind of at least hiccup because of how integral Stilgar is to Paul's rise, to what he is at the end of the film.
I would say it's almost, with it done right, it's more accurate to society. Society is not all doom and gloom.
Speak for yourself, Riley.
Sorry, I know Tennessee lost, but some of us have hope in our teams today.
Shut up.
But I think it's, when done right, it creates a good balance. And I think the way they did it was good because it balanced the cultural differences between the North and the South from it. And I think that was a good way to do it, while also doing a good job of helping pace for the audience watching. Because I think it kept them engaged into more or less niche society interactions and cultural differences between two tribes of a planet, which can be hard to do, I feel like, especially because, like, if you're trying to engage everybody, there's plenty of people who will be interested in that, in a very dark version of that storytelling, without a question. But if you want to reach everybody, I think you have to be balanced, because I think that makes way more sense. across the board, just for. And it also, I feel like, makes it a little more universal to cultures around the globe. Like, it allows it to connect to more audiences. Because I don't think, not every culture is going to be super serious. Some are going to be super humorous. And, like, everyone reacts differently and interacts differently. And there's different humors, different senses. I think that universality to it, in a sense, makes it so that it's more digestible. While also breaking down those very serious, I don't say niche details, but very intricate details that are continuing to unfold over the 2 hours and 45 minutes that the movie runs. Like, it just makes sense, I think, in a way of doing that. And I think it's done very masterfully that you don't really notice it's happening, but it's almost like it's almost like a baby. You're giving them fun food, but then they're actually getting the nutrients and the things they need as well.
Yeah.
You said two things that I want to touch on. One, I just kind of was reminded of this with our talk about the comedy I can tell TJ is slightly uncomfortable with me being this close to him. The way you're sitting, TJ, I don't know if that's just different or... But
he's
anyway.
just trying to look at you.
or it's more just like, go on. Go on.
See?
Here's my shoulder. Look at my back. Don't hit me. Protect my vital organs.
The Empire Strikes Back reference that you've made, famously Christopher Nolan made, is very apt when we are talking about the comedy and the seriousness. Because, right, you think of Han Solo in that movie.
Oh, yeah?
And C-3PO and Empire Strikes Back. They're hilarious in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But it's very...
Even Yoda, too.
Even Yoda.
Yeah.
Some of his best lines are comedic lines in the film.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a movie where, spoilers if for some reason you haven't seen Empire Strikes Back, we find out that literally the baddest dude in the galaxy is Luke's father, who is trying to defeat this empire that his father's created. So it is an apt comparison you made there and Christopher Nolan's made. And then your comment about the making the different cultures of the Fremen like so unique and so different, that what makes that universal and makes it a better movie is it becomes then a better reflection of our society. And those deep, very serious themes about religion and ecology and the politics that are going on in this story that much more interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It's so fun, and they do this really well. I said this last episode, but they do this really well with very intricate political thrillers. Like, there's a lot of language that they don't explain, but it's like, oh, I'm invested because they feel like they're not babying me. Like, they want me in this world right away, and I don't have to. I'm not a toddler.
Yeah.
I'm not learning all this new vocabulary. I'm not in elementary school. So when they say things, when there is the Bene Gesserit talking about their intricate relationships and how they aren't on one side and how they're playing the field, it's all very haunting and realistic because there's none of that nurturing.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and this made me think of it too. We'll probably touch on this more as we connect it to Star Wars, but Vader being Luke's father also connects to then Paul being cousins of the Harkonnen, which I don't know why I never thought of that till you said that, but that totally just clicked in my head. And so like the more and more twists you get from Star Wars to Dune makes total sense. And I was gonna say too, there are people. I mean, I've seen some criticism of like the movie from people who haven't watched it, which I don't know why people criticize anything they haven't watched. Beyond me. But I find it interesting. It's the people who haven't watched it are basically their criticisms of the movie are the exact opposite of what the movie actually does, which I find because it's so.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, like people are talking people were saying like, oh, I thought we were boycotting Dune for some political reason. I don't know.
I think because it was like
they're talking about white saviorism,
Oh yeah,
like colonialism and stuff, and they're like, it's not at all what happened. It's quite the contrary. It's a commentary on it, and Paul is. Realistically, he's not the hero. He's an anti-hero. And it's very realistic to what that is and it explaining kind of that.
Yeah.
Which I find very interesting. And I think they do a very good job of almost touching on everything. Like you said, ecology, religion, tribal interactions, societal interactions, the economy, whether it's trade and all that. Like it's very deep, very real information built off of history. I mean, it's built through so many different interactions that have happened time and time again through world history. And that's what makes it almost universal in a sense too, because we've talked about the universality of the society and the growth and the religion and the comedy of it and the interactions. Having that also, that kind of that historical basis and I guess experimenting with it and understanding the context of things that have happened in the past, tying that in with the good writing and the good acting, creates this universal story that almost every piece has touched someone's life some way or another across many different times, I think that's also one reason why James Cameron Avatar did so well globally. I don't think it's the most fantastic movie ever, but it's so universal and it made it so easy for people to, and with obviously cutting edge CGI, made it very, very interesting for its time. But I think that's that universality story makes movies touch all corners of the globe versus like a niche indie film that may touch a corner of the US or something else, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
That's the thing with science fiction and fantasy, right? Is
yeah.
you can have a story and make it allegorical for many different things. Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, this is an allegory for specifically World War II or One or whatever you want to make it an allegory of.
Yeah.
This Dune story can be an allegory of a lot of different things because it is so Frank Herbert and Denis have made this world where it isn't directly related to one event or situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an apt thing you mentioned. I was going to say something else from what you were talking about earlier, but I don't know if I forgot. I think I might have forgot that. You said a lot of great things. Is there anything you wanted to hit on, TJ, from what he was talking about?
Nothing that he hasn't already said.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to mention about Stilgar? It'll probably come back to me like halfway through some other conversation, but
I mean, with Stilgar, first off, I mean, Javier Bardem did a great thing. I think that's universally. I feel like that just needs to be stated just as a baseline.
Oh yeah.
But I thought him as kind of the guide, but also in a sense, like, I mean, being the Southern Fremen, but also kind of, he was almost like the connector of the two in a sense. Mm-hmm. Like, in a sense, I mean, obviously we had Chuni with Paul, but then you also have Stilgar. And, like, you have this, like, compare and contrast with the two of them that gives Paul, what's the word for it? He basically gives him a depth to understanding that kind of pushes him to where he goes. I think they're two very integral, very different characters that basically almost like kind of move him into this one direction that he ends in. Obviously, his mom's also a factor in that too. And there's the juice of life, or
Water of Life.
Water of Life. Thank you. And like all those different. Give me some OJ of life. But I think the contrast of those characters, the way Zendaya and Javier did both of those characters in almost polar opposite personalities and experiences, gives such a good contrast and kind of plays into the way the comedy played into those dynamics. Like, they were the core of those interactions between the comedy and the seriousness.
The whole Chosen One critique, I didn't even know that was a thing, and those people that made that comment are literally stupid because Frank Herbert literally said the whole point of writing Dune was showing that Paul like the flaws with the Chosen One story. Oh, yeah. That's literally the whole point of Dune. And the reason he wrote Dune Messiah was because some people actually did bring that critique, and they're like, oh, he is like highlighting like the Chosen One as like this great, story. So he made Dune Messiah to say, you guys are idiots. No, that's not what I was going for. And so Denis writing Dune Part 2 wanted to make sure none of that happened, which apparently there are idiots out there that made that same exact critique and didn't get that. But anyway, yeah, that's the thing. For example, with the... Right, Paul's whole thing is he's trying to bring peace to the Fremen. But what does he do by the end of the movie? He just sets them off on, like, more chaos and war and vengeance.
He starts a global war.
Instead of trying to make...
Sorry, galaxy war. My apologies.
Like crusades.
Pretty much.
Intergalactic crusades is what he does.
Pretty much.
And instead of trying to make peace with the houses and trying to bring peace to the Fremen, he's like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have even more violence, even more chaos, and even more just death and destruction. I don't know exactly... Those people that made that comment, okay. You think you need some work there. Or and maybe watch the movie. That would be a good idea.
That too.
Or just look up on the internet. What? That frustrates me. Literally, one of the reasons that Dune is such an iconic story is because of its comments on the Chosen One story.
Exactly.
Riley, I wouldn't go as far to say that he is a anti-hero. I would say, because that's how I always originally thought of it, as an anti-hero. To me, and I'm not trying to be like this all-knowing Riley, my opinion is the best. I see it more as he is a hero with severe flaws. And those flaws, again, allow for like the deep commentary on the Chosen One story. So I don't go as far as to say anti-hero, but especially because he has a lot of good intentions, and even when he's like at that breaking point, he still feels like he's doing those good intentions. So to me, there's still a gap between him and a hardcore anti-hero. But so like I said, I kind of land where it's hero, but with some just massive flaws and allowing great commentary.
I think the reason I would say anti-hero is not because of who he is or the character of him. I would say more so as the result of his actions.
Okay.
I think in the sense that the results of what he does and the consequences in the Fremen and galactically, there is a sense of an anti-hero because of the carnage and the issues that can pop up. Now, that could be maybe a critique, maybe more on their ego, the Bene Gesserits, this, that, like influences. Obviously, there's lots of discussion we could talk about, like which goes which way, what influences what way, and what makes what. Obviously that's a lot of niche detail into someone's psychology and the psychology of people around him and the results of the results of those psychological effects. But that's why I would stick anti-hero. And then 2, Star Wars again. The Chosen One story. Obviously very prevalent in Star Wars 2 with Anakin and Luke. It's very interesting to see. It's in the sense of like, in the original trilogy, they don't really talk about the Chosen One. The prequels they do, but the story of the Chosen One in the prequels very much ties into the results of the original trilogy. But it's very interesting to see, almost to compare the Bene Gesserits to Palpatine and the Sith, in a sense, like they were puppeting Anakin the whole time. Just as the Bene Gesserits were puppeting both Foyd, I can never say his name right. Foyd? Austin Butler's kid. Fade. Jesus, I can never say it right. Fade Roth the Harkonnen, and Paul Atreides, but then also like Anakin and the different pawns like Maul and those people. It's oddly similar in a sense. Like comparing Anakin and Maul and those people that were in there, which... When you say the Chosen One, it makes me think of like all the little manipulations and all the way that the downsides of being the Chosen One. Yeah. But I feel like Star Wars critiques it much less than Dune does. But I think it's very similar in that sense.
Which is okay. I mean, that's not a knock on Star Wars,
not
but
at
it's
all.
Right, because I mean that is as we've been discussing, that is the goal of Dune after all, is to knock a lot of that stuff. You're taking all the content, Riley, for the end of the episode about comparing it to Star Wars.
Sorry, I love Star Wars too much. It's always in my head.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said, and I'm still going to push back on the anti-hero thing, but I see what you're saying. I think there's the bulk of the commentary can come from not who Paul is as like an individual and his philosophy and his sort of like storyline, but like the things that are affected because of that and the results because of that. But I get where you're going, and you're not alone in that. There are a lot of people that
I agree. I could
that.
go both ways. Like, it's not like I'm like a hardcore, he's an anti-hero. And I see both ways. I think I just side with the anti-hero at the moment, but I'm sure with a couple of rewatches, who knows what I'll think.
Yeah.
As it always goes.
It's bottom line is what he's doing is not great.
Yes. Bottom line, he's hurting people.
Well, hot take.
Hot take, he's hurt a lot of people.
Who would have guessed?
All right, let's talk about some scenes and shots. We mentioned at the end of last episode the duel, which was... When I first read it in the book, I just nerded out, and then I watched the duel in David Lynch's Dune movie, and I was like kind of underwhelmed. But then this movie was just score cut out. Everyone was just surrounding us. They literally all the big actors just, and they do this in like the book, but they're all just like, let's let these two cook, and they just cooked. It was great. We talked about that scene. We talked about the opening where you have the Harkonnens raising and lowering as they're trying to escape the Fremen at the opening when they're trying to find them in the desert. But other than that, and we talked about the scenes on, what's the name of the Harkonnen planet? Giddy Prime.
Yeah.
We had talked about a few of those scenes as well. Is there any others that, TJ, that you want to talk about that come off the top of your head? Well, we also talked about the sandworm scene as well. We hit, to be fair, we hit like all the big ones.
Yeah, we kind of touched on each.
That's why I kind of feel bad, but again, if we want to go through any of those, we can. But I wanted to have you on here because I know you had a lot. I know you have a lot of great comments, and you've already made a lot of great comments.
I mean, the shots are incredible. I mean, there's no question about that. I'm sure you guys said that with the last time. I love the way they did it. The one that's most impressive is going to be no surprise to me or to you guys, but it's the fight scene, the gladiator scene, basically, in the arena. And I love how they shot that. I thought that was so cool. Like infrared, black and white, getting the costumes right. It gives you just this eerie feeling. Like it's so different and I love that. I mean, because it totally portrays like the Black Sun idea and this different stuff like that. But the way it's done, the way it's choreographed, the costume design, everything is just so cool. Like, I don't think there's ever been a scene I think that was the first time that's ever been done. Like, I think Denis was on the cutting edge for that one, which is so cool.
So you're talking about the infrared with the black and white you're referring to? Yeah. It is really cool. It creates I mentioned this last time, a milky white texture, a milky texture on their skin, which creates that eerie feeling that you're talking about.
It's so... Oh, there was another movie character that kind of reminded me of like this different world.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Idaho Classic. What was it? I think... Oh, what was it? I think it was the... Well, in a little bit of a sense... I was going to say, okay... It reminds me of there's a couple different gladiator scenes in different movies that have been different done. It reminded me of the crowd. I don't know why, but the crowd in Tron. So, just because it's so different. It's almost like a program crowd in a sense. It's like so rabid and like bought into this like messed up ideal. They also like the way they acted reminded me kind of like orcs in Lord of the Rings, like the savagery and the mentality and the way. I think the Harkonnens and the orcs, they have this kind of like common ground of how like they interact, how they talk, how they treat each other, like with intense of fear, and like kind of the intense emotions, so to say. I don't know why, but those two were. I don't know why I thought of those two, but that's just kind of what came to my mind seeing that scene, which is totally very different scenes or characters and scenes, but I felt like there was a little bit of those in that scene, which was weird.
I see where you're going with both. The very much they are, controlled and forced into a very specific evil purpose, and I think you're spot on with that. It's the way they're bowing down to the Baron, and the way they react to Fade and all of his kills in the gladiator sequence, and I mean obviously just with how dark it all is. In Tron it's very dark. Yes, there's neon lights and everything, but besides that it's all dark scenery. And obviously the orcs, I mean it's dark there as well with them and the aroma that they carry with them. I agree completely. Where I was going to go was with the black and white.
Yeah.
Awesome touch. It's
oh my God, yeah.
It's a great show moment because it's very much here we have the Harkonnens, which are a very straightforward black and white antagonist. We know what they want and we know how they're going to try and get it. Whereas when you have the color on Arrakis and with the Atreides and the Fremen, there's a complexity to that force, whether it's because of Paul, as we talked about, with what he's doing is not totally pure, or whether it's even goes down to the bloodline with Lady Jessica being the daughter of the Baron. There's a lot of complexity to that side. You get all that color, whereas with the Harkonnens, it's straightforward. It's black and white. There's really no nuance to them. Great show moment. Very, very effective. We talked about the Killers of the Flower Moon in our last episode, and how you and John, and to me as well to some extent, all agreed that he could have used the time more effectively. Great way for Denis to make an almost 3-hour movie effective by having that by deciding to switch to black and white.
It was very, I mean, with Oppenheimer doing as well as it did last weekend, but like very Nolan touch. And I mean, seeing them talk about it, it's very interesting to see that compensate. But also, I think another point I want to add is, in terms of the characters and the way they work, the Harkonnens, they're very fear-driven. They use their power, they wield their power by wielding fear. And as we see throughout the movie, fear is not very effective. Like, it doesn't go very well. They don't exactly have a lot of success trying to fight the Fremen and find Paul. And clearly it breaks down quickly at the end when they just get bull rushed. But from all sides, from all the Fremen and everyone else left from House Atreides, which is, I mean, as expected. I mean, but it's a cool contrast to the way they use fear, and it's a very simple way to rule and wield power, but also compared to the complexity of leading through respect and influence. I feel like it ties very deeply into how that works in reality.
I was gonna say history can just attest for that.
Oh yeah,
many cases.
Oh yeah, any empire that has fallen usually has fallen because they've led through fear.
Probably.
There's a good chance of that, and there's no different in the movies with the Harkonnen versus House Atreides, which is also why also just connecting into the movie why the Emperor got so scared of them because of their influence. Through the respect and through the proper leadership, they were gaining traction. And the Emperor was having none of that. He had to take him out because he knew he could not beat that. No one can beat that. If you have a whole population of people that respect you and trust you and you treat them well, you're not going to beat that. You can't outdo that as someone who had power on the other side.
Exactly.
Which I thought was a very interesting way that also ties in with the way they shot it and the way that they built it with between the interactions between all those characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of conflicts, both big and small, throughout history that authors and people have made comments on by saying, oh, this could have been cured with genuineness and genuine connections with each other. And that is a prime example of that with Duke Leto trying to make these genuine connections with the Fremen to work together and work alongside each other. And of course, like you said, the Emperor is nervous of that, and rightfully so, because there have been plenty of conflicts that arise because there is a lack of communication and lack of respect.
Exactly. Like it's history. It's human nature. It's not a complex thing that people don't understand. It's right at the tip of your nose. It's tied into probably every friendship and every mentor that anyone's ever had in their life. It usually ties into those qualities.
And that's what makes great storytelling, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is when you have universal things and you put them into a story and work them out in a story, whether it's a book or a movie. That is very powerful things because of its universality, and it's interesting for the audience because that's what is going on in real life. Great point. Any other scenes or shots that you guys want to mention? Now, this also kind of leads into the references to other films as well. Mm-hmm. I think one of the most obvious is Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, both are shot in a desert, and when you get with Lawrence of Arabia, when you get those extreme long shots, extreme wide shots of them walking through the desert, it's in Dune. My mind was immediately thinking, or wasn't immediately, but upon reflection was, oh yeah, I can see the Lawrence of Arabia influence here. You're going on set, you're going to location, you're shooting in a grand scale way, and of course, talking about the white savior storyline, T.E. Lawrence with Lawrence of Arabia, the British white officer coming to the Middle East and trying to save these Arabs. And so you can also make that parallel as well in that instance. Of course, there's also 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a big one as well. I remember upon rewatch of the first one, which I rewatched before watching the second one for the first time with you guys, what's so chilling about 2001 is there's this very chilling piece of music in it where it's like, oh, you know what I'm talking about, TJ? Mm-hmm. Have you seen 2001, Riley?
I've seen parts of it.
Okay.
I've not finished it yet.
There's like it has a very ominous score.
Yeah.
And the way, I don't think they play it anywhere else except for the openings of part 1 and part 2. But when Chani in part 1 has her voiceover, does she have a voiceover at the beginning of part 2? I can't remember.
No, I think
Florence
it's just
Pugh.
words at the beginning.
Oh, that's right. It is.
No, Florence Pugh has a little monologue at the beginning.
She does.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes. So the openings have that eerie score piece of music with shots that are the way they shoot the planets very similar to the shooting style of 2001. In both instances, I just got chills. The openings to both those movies are so chilling. where I think Chani ends in part 1 with who will help us now, or what's going to happen next, or something along those lines. Very chilling. Another great reference, and then the one that I got immediately that TJ thought I was going to turn to him and slap him on the shoulder,
Of course.
is the Ride of the Valkyries reference, which is, I believe, it's later on in the movie. It's when...
It's like a fourth of the way into the movie.
Yeah, it's when... What's his name? I'm forgetting his name. Dave Bautista's character is going to try and get... he's making this big push to find this Muad'Dib, whoever he is. And they have an extremely long wide shot, multiple, of their little aircraft going to where they think the Fremen are and Muad'Dib is, and immediately connecting Denis' love for Apocalypse Now and the way that, even if he didn't say that, the way that scene is shot, very much Ride of the Valkyries, which enhances, like it does in Apocalypse Now, enhances the grand scale filmmaking, and it makes you really feel like you're in that environment that Denis is creating. Those are the references that I picked up. You guys feel like they're pretty apt? I would say so.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I like the reference of cutting to black and white, like in Thor: Love and Thunder.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Wonderful, wonderful movie.
The best Marvel movie.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to touch on, and I can't remember if I discussed this in the first episode. TJ will have to remind me. My memory is terrible, as TJ knows.
Oh, I can attest to this. You get that notepad yet? John made the joke that he was going to start carrying a notepad around, and then he forgot to buy the notepad.
Oh, the evidence. Just use the notes in your phone. There's
Dude,
an
that's
app.
the thing. I do that, and it still doesn't work.
That's what reminders are for.
Those still don't work.
They notify you.
Yeah, but the problem is they get like either stuck in all my other notifications, or like I see them and then I'll be
They're
honest.
at the top.
Yeah, but the problem is I put my phone down and I don't do it. So I guess it's a me problem.
That sounds like a you problem.
Yeah, at this point.
Okay, this isn't. We're not trying to make fun of me here. Okay, maybe we are, but I wanted to talk about, because I've been seeing it in other books and movies recently, is the idea of, actually, because we had a conversation about this, free will versus destiny. I love this conversation, especially in the sense of Dune. It's a good one to have.
Yes.
Because does Paul have free will in this movie, or does he not? I would argue in many ways, I would argue he doesn't, because of the things like the prophecy, which was set up by the Bene Gesserit, and then him trying to correct that and putting all his effort into saying, I'm not going to cause harm, I'm not going to do that, but ultimately causing harm. There's so many structures that are set up in Paul's journey that make it hard for him to have free will.
Mm-hmm. I would
Free
agree.
will versus destiny.
I would agree. And I think it's a commentary too, maybe so on society in a sense, like that we could be given the idea like you have free will, but societies may or a group in society like the Bene Gesserits, for example, in the movie, are almost pigeonholing your opportunity at free will.
Yeah.
In a sense, is like you have free will, but if you want to survive, you have to do these things, or you have free will, and no matter what choice you make, these are the outcomes. It's like this complex idea of like which is which, what's going on, which I find very interesting and feels very relevant to history and society today as just being a young person and just in general. Like, you feel that a lot, I feel, in a way. And it feels very connective to be, I would say, younger and having those ideas and having to work through those things.
Literally, the Fremen are controlled, a lot of them at least, by the prophecy that was created by the Bene Gesserit.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least in some way hindering your ability to have free will.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you've been conditioned to believe it, whether you want to or not, it's affecting the entire society, which is wild. Like, there's the impact of that and the detail of that. It's like, okay, what's real?
Mm-hmm.
Are we just existing? Like, who's calling the shots in the movie? Where's it going? Who knows?
That piece specifically, too, hinders all those criticisms about Paul being a white savior, because literally, if we want to continue on this history conversation, when it became to imperialism and colonialism, what were white people doing? They were going in to these places and forcing their religion upon other people and having them adopt it. That's literally what the Bene Gesserit did in a very covert way.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what they did.
Yeah, and
to these indigenous people.
And very unsuccessful in places, too, whether it was the disease or different things. There are many places who did not come out better than they did before. And it's very interesting to see that comparison. Like, no, this is a commentary on the negative effects of what has happened historically, especially with the British and the French and the Belgians and pretty much all of Europe through from the conception of the U.S. and previously through World War II.
Yeah, basically.
That's pretty much. I mean, that was realistically the start and the end of the imperialistic era, which is wild, and we still see it in the modern day. I mean, the end of that era also ended up giving us everything that's happened. A lot of issues with whether it's the Middle East, Africa, so many different things. Like, there's so many regions that have had issues because of this.
Because the way they set these countries up, yeah.
They set them up, the way they imperialized put their religion on them, manipulate the society different ways, like the Bene Gesserits, which is super interesting. And they're super powerful. And I found it very interesting what Denis said too about all of that, why he made the Bene Gesserits and why he wrote them the way he did. He talking about kind of the power of the female and working it through the female influence and doing it, and it was in a very powerful way, which I don't know if we've ever really seen, like a female group of empowered or in power. Empowered it means something else like that.
You're forgetting Charlie's Angels, please.
My apologies. But in a sense that he does a very good job of writing it in the sense that he understands the impacts and the power of women and writes it in a very strong, very realistic, which I thought was super interesting. And I don't think it's talked about enough in a lot of movies, in a sense, is like the power of women and in movies, society, different things. There is an incredible power there. And I loved his reasoning because he was pretty much saying just because women are super powerful, they run the world. They've run a lot of history, but there's not a lot of credibility. They've always been behind the scenes, kind of like the Bene Gesserit in a sense. So I thought it was super interesting to connect the positives and the negatives of the actions of historical beings, but then also tying it into the influence and the effects and the power of women, which was super interesting. It's very different, but I think it's different in a good way that we haven't seen before.
I agree. What they did, which I was pleased by, is they enhanced the power that mothers have and the influence that mothers have.
Oh yeah.
Most notably, one of the more notable ways, and mothers don't inherently do this, but but the way the Bene Gesserit are literally controlling the gene pool to get the Kwisatz Haderach. this person that can like rule all, basically rule all the houses, rule everyone. It unintentionally becomes Paul, but because they were trying to get a female, but that's also that's also a very historical thing if you want to think about. I hate we keep going back to this, but at the same time, it's relevant.
Yeah.
Like what they were doing with like the Native Americans,
Yeah.
what the white Americans were doing with Native Americans, and trying to control those genes and eradicate their culture and things like that. Good point. A lot of good points here, Riley.
Try my best.
Yeah, but I totally dug that with the story, and it's something that needed to be stated because of how powerful mothers are when they are and aren't there. There's a ton of great stories with both directions and the positives and negatives of those. And here we're seeing kind of almost like, well, definitely there's negatives, but just in general how powerful motherhood is and mothers are. Well, and you can also see it with not just the Bene Gesserit, but with, of course, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I mean, just seeing her storyline.
Oh yeah, I mean the amount of influence she has over Paul and his growth, and kind of, for lack of a better term, joysticking it the way she does. It's just super interesting.
And being the mother of the Fremen too,
Yeah.
of the Fremen tribe,
Yeah.
and telling all of them. And this also kind of falls into a connection with how religion and beliefs are started, but the way she's like, did you hear about Paul? And he rode the giant sandworm and spread the news around. We're trying to build up his image so everyone can believe in him and create this unified belief in him. Is motherhood times religion. Powerful stuff going on there, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. Plenty of religions talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to talk about. I don't think so. I'm glad we got to all the stuff that I had on my list. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about some other stuff, Riley, but I didn't want to repeat everything that was on
You're
the first
good.
one.
Totally get that.
I think that's all I have, TJ.
I don't know. I'm good.
We can talk about the Oscars for a little bit, just real quickly.
I'm satisfied either way.
Okay. It doesn't have to be very long, but what do you guys think? Did you like the winner for Best Picture? Did you like a lot of the choices?
Everything felt expected, and not in a bad way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
I was like, like the people who deserved to win won. There were others who were definitely deserving, but I think this was a year of very good cinema, great cinema, like generational movies, like quite a few. And those generation movies won a good bit or stole our hearts in their performances at the Oscars, one or the other. More so referencing Barbie not winning too much, but Ryan Gosling stealing the show with I'm Just Ken.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, real quick, would you say that 2023 was like the best year since 2019 for movies?
It has to be.
Yeah, I would say so too. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one thinking that.
It has to be, because like it's the first time we've really gotten out of the COVID slump, I would say.
That is true.
And I mean, we'll have a little bit with the writer's strike. We'll have a little bit of a gap, but for the most part, I think we're gonna. And they're starting to talk. Like I've seen studies or surveys, not studies, about like what Gen Z and millennials are preferring to see in cinemas, and it's more original stuff, more and like all this different stuff. So studios seem to be responding.
Yeah.
And having the originality that we've seen, I think is going to go a long way. Hopefully to give us a more 90s-esque decade in this sense. Kind of like what Quentin Tarantino's talked about, how it swings. You have a repressive decade or two to a massive or a very influential, very high-level decade of cinema. So I think and also we could probably contribute some of that to superhero fatigue. We've had almost 15 years of that at this point.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't like Marvel movies or anything. I have my problems with them right now, but it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy them. But I think this more originality and this swing is going to give us more, hopefully more like Oppenheimer's, Dune 2's, Barbie's, this thing, stuff like that.
Your comment reminded me of something, which is in a couple weeks, or at least later on, you should come back on the podcast because you'd be a good person to have a discussion with when it comes to the stuff that's been going on with Marvel recently, and thoughts on that. So if you'd be willing,
Absolutely.
at some point in the
I
next month,
want
or
to do
so.
the romance one too.
Yes. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Jeez, Riley, we haven't announced that yet. No.
I was like, we could just bleep me.
Oh,
Yeah. We are going to do a before trilogy podcast episode. It's going to be TJ, me, John, and Riley. But then we're also going to, in another episode or in conjunction with that episode, talk about a bunch of other romance movies and the genre in general, which will be cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I need a list to make sure I'm caught up on everything.
And
That
I
is a
think,
good
too,
idea.
what would be good for that episode, actually, is just to make the conversation more lively, is make a list, like a base list of saying, like, hey, before this episode, let's all have watched these movies, and then we can definitely know we can discuss those movies.
I would throw Normal People as a miniseries into that too.
We can make that work. If we
Yeah.
need to wait, we can wait, too, a little longer.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with waiting.
No, no need, no reason.
We'll not push it off like the Rocky ranking.
Do you want to tell Riley how long
The infamous Rocky ranking. So, before Creed 3 came out in like March of last year, we're like,
Yeah.
let's watch all the Rocky movies and Creed, and then we'll rank them all right after Creed 3 comes out. Creed 3 comes out, John watches it like immediately. I forget about it for like 10 months. And then I finally watch it after 10 months of it being out, and I'm like, all right, I guess we're going to do the episode. John and I both completely forgot about doing the episode for another like 2 more months. So we finally just did it within like maybe a month ago or something, but it was just like we kept like for a long time we were like, and next episode Rocky ranking maybe, and then no. And then it
Just no.
disappeared. It disappeared, and then it magically reappeared one day.
Well, the funny thing is, like, I can imagine the few people that actually do listen to us on the regular just being so confused because they're like,
Where is this?
where is this?
Yeah, we filmed it and it was gone.
Poof.
Being the good host that I am, I forgot there is some other Dune stuff to talk about. I was going to ask you this, TJ, being the David Lynch lover that you are.
Mm-hmm. What about it?
What are your thoughts, and I know this is unfair in many ways, but what are your thoughts on the David Lynch Dune movie compared to this Part 1, Part 2? Comparing them,
Oh, yeah.
overall thoughts on them. What do you think?
I mean, they're very different types of adaptations. With the older version, the Lynch version being very quick, very snappy, we're gonna do the whole book in 2 hours, which I mean is a task in and of itself. And does it do it all effectively? No. Does it nail a lot of the tone of the book? No. But I mean, it's not a bad movie per se. I mean, we've watched it twice together, and I mean, I think we both liked it more the second time. But it's not like by any means like a god awful movie or like a bad. I think it just has its strong problems. Let's just put it that way.
You could say that.
Yeah, but I mean, as like a light viewing of Dune, or like the story of Dune, I think there's something to that. Where that this new version it's way better as a movie. It's way better as an adaptation. It's leagues and bounds better in practically every way. But I mean, there is still space for that old one, and I think the old one being the cult classic that it was for 30-ish years or something like that. I mean, it has its space in cinema history, although it's not the best movie in his career or in general.
You could call it a Spark Notes version of Dune in many ways.
Yeah, exactly. Considering, yeah, like, it just like punches through the plot. I mean, it adds its own weird shit sometimes, and that makes it even more bizarre. Have you seen the old version?
I have not. Because I've heard about the
Oh.
adaptation. I was just like, I don't know if I want to go through that. But now
Oh.
I probably should.
Please do. It's so interesting.
That sounds like in a bad way.
Okay.
The way you say it sounds like you have to watch it because it's terrible.
No, it's not. It's not like I said. It's not bad in any way. Like, I don't think it's a bad movie. It's just a very different kind of version of it. You'll watch it and you'll just be like, this this isn't as good as the new one, like at all.
That feels terrifying to do now that I've seen both.
Yeah, fair enough.
Part of the reason why I had such a negative viewing on it the first time was because I just came off of reading the book.
Yeah,
And my immediate thought was, this didn't capture anything of the original book, except for, I guess, again, the Spark Notes version of it, and in a very monotone way.
yeah.
But upon rewatch and distancing myself from the book, it's actually, for what David Lynch was given, especially, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I get why he hates it, but I mean, like at the end of the day, like I said, it's a cult classic. You can't go wrong with it. It's not a bad movie by any stretch.
If you set your expectations to the technology and the things that were available,
That's true.
Fair.
give it in 84,
84.
then you'll also kind of have a better opinion of it.
Okay. Yeah, because like for the most part, most films in '84, I feel like are base. It more so just elevates any film that looked great in '84, like Star Wars.
Yes.
Yeah,
I feel like that's more what it does. It just elevates the movies that looked really good of the era and past the time,
yeah.
rather than like hurting the movies of its era. But I feel like that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it was coming off right off of Return of the Jedi, so
By the way, I don't know if you know, you might know this, yeah, because you're a Star Wars fan. David Lynch was originally asked to direct Return of the Jedi.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That would have been a very interesting
Very different.
choice. No offense to David Lynch, as we saw from Dune, that's just not his forte.
no.
I hate to say it, but I feel like the Star Wars would not be what it is by that one decision.
Oh, it wouldn't. Absolutely
No.
wouldn't be. I mean, yeah.
If they ended the original trilogy like that,
It's like, okay, it's like, no, there's no reason to get a prequel at that point. Like, is there going to be demand for it? Who knows?
I mean, it's
because
like,
the momentum would have just been shot.
Yeah.
it'd be like if George Lucas did Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Or Spielberg did The Godfather.
Ooh,
Like, he would have done a good job, but it's not the same.
no.
No, it's not.
How have you seen any David Lynch movies?
I probably have. I just don't know which ones he's done.
Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet,
Okay. I have not seen those ones.
Eraserhead.
There's a lot I need to see.
Oh,
If you're to start out with one, I would honestly do, well, TJ's seen more of them, but I don't know. I'd say Blue Velvet, as far as
if you want to get like the surrealist side of him, Mulholland Drive. If you want him being less surrealisty, Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then go to like Eraserhead and stuff like that.
Okay.
Twin Peaks.
I'm definitely in my romance movie era right now.
You're
That's
not in your surrealism era.
No. more on the very almost movies about nothing.
Yeah,
That's a good era to be in, though.
Oh, it's so good.
It's great.
I still have a lot to go. I think next I'm going to do About Time.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, John has been wanting to show us that for a while. I've heard
If you
it's
like
good.
time travel, which I've always been obsessed with time travel movies.
Okay.
Palm Springs, great one. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No.
That's a funny movie.
I love Palm Springs.
I haven't seen it since it came
Genuinely
out.
one of my favorite time movies, but also a great rom-com with good drama. Definitely it came out during COVID on Hulu because it was a Sundance movie.
Yeah.
Really good though.
I think it was like 2020.
Yeah, it was because I watched it with my parents during COVID, like in
Yeah.
their house. It was awesome. It was so good.
Such a good movie.
I was not expecting anything, and I've rewatched it so many times.
I haven't seen it since, and I'm dying to rewatch it.
I
so
think I've rewatched it like at least 6 times.
that's the mark of a good movie.
It's really very good. Good cast too.
Oh yeah.
Andy Samberg, JJ. Why am I forgetting his last name?
J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons. Jesus, why did I call him JJ?
Did you? I didn't.
I called him JJ. J.K. Simmons.
J.J. Abrams was starring in that movie.
Kristen Milioti, and a bunch of others.
I think you were thinking of his character in Spider-Man.
Yeah, J. Jonah Jameson. That's why. Guaranteed, and he's J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah.
In part 1, did John and I talk about how well the movie was adapted? Or how well
I
the book
think
was
so.
adapted? Did we talk about that?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We did. if for some reason we didn't, thumbs up. It's incredibly hard story to adapt.
Famously inadaptable.
Yes. And they did it literally as well as I thought they could have. As someone who's also biased because I'm an English writing major, I don't think any book can be flawlessly adapted, but that's as close as I think you can get.
Yeah.
It's on the level of Apocalypse Now, which Apocalypse Now did significantly alter the story from the original text, but still,
Yeah.
it is about as good as you could get. I think then in that case, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think we're good. Riley, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
As the audience now knows, we will see you hopefully shortly, within at least a couple months.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got some movies to watch.
Yes, we all do. Talking about romance movies. We'll hit the Before trilogy, which TJ and I have always wanted to do on this podcast. Any last final thoughts on anything?
Go watch Dune 2 if you haven't. Please. Please. Please.
Good final comment. All right, for that guy over there, Trevor Chick and Riley, we will catch you on the next episode of the Manic Movie Misfits podcast. Peace.